An old woman lived in a cabin on the side of the mountain at the end of a faded road in a country which had long forgotten her name. In the winter, which lasted most of the year, her stone fireplace provided warmth and light. She fed it from a dwindling stack of split logs next to the cabin, just outside the door. A hunter whose name she did not know occasionally left her the leg of a deer he harvested from the forest, a stoic act of humble gratitude for his bounty. In the brief seasons of spring and summer, the woman planted vegetables to preserve for the months of frozen ground. During spring and summer, she drank the rain. During fall and winter, she drank the snow. In this way, she spent her days, wondering when they might run out. Gazing out her window, the woman observed a gentle snowfall. Only minutes ago, it had been nothing but sparkles in the blue air. Now it fell heavily enough to turn everything gray outside her window. She glanced toward the depleted row of tinder next to the fireplace. If the snow continued falling so heavily, she could be snowed in. In preparation for this possibility, she draped herself in wool garments and opened the cabin door. The wind sweeping down the mountain blasted her, beating against her thick clothes. Her layers spared her the chill, but the force of the wind made her hesitate. But, despite the difficulty, she began her necessary task. The stack of firewood outside the door looked nearly as bare as the one inside. The woman had not expected to outlive her supply. She had watched it shrink through many cold months and storms. Never had she thought she would live to see it so low. Carrying what she could, she retreated inside, forcing the door closed with her back. One of the split logs tumbled from her embrace and thudded to the floor. The woman carried the rest to the dwindling stack near the fireplace. Noticing her fire nearly depleted, she gently placed one of the warm, dry logs into the fireplace and stoked the embers. The task of renewing the fire drained her in proportion with its vital nature rather than its physical cost. She fell back into her threadbare armchair, admiring and rejuvenating in the resurrected flame. Already the cabin felt warmer. She took mental stock of her supplies. The fresh snow would provide plenty of water to drink and bathe as needed. With spring still weeks away, she needn't worry about running out of food since she preserved enough food to last through the long winter. Her main concern rested in front of her. The small supply of firewood never intended to survive her. As snow continued to fall, she worried it might be many days before she could take the heavy axe on the mantel outside to gather more wood. Not one to entertain despair often, the woman found its company difficult to resist in that lonely cabin as the gray sky outside darkened. With the snow blowing almost horizontally through it, the sky looked like a wolf's hide. A sound beyond possibility shocked her, unaware she had even fallen asleep, awake. A knock at the door. The hunter? She wondered. Had he been caught in the weather? Eager to rescue him from the storm, if rescue he should need, the woman rose. On her way to the door, she noticed the dropped log. In case someone besides the hunter, a stranger, had knocked, the woman picked up the log and clutched it to her chest. She noticed her failure to engage the heavy chain, sturdy enough to hopefully keep out curious bears. Thankfully, whoever had knocked possessed the courtesy to do so rather than to simply barge in. With helpless caution, the woman pulled open the door. A 2-foot wall of snow, the top of which blew in and dusted her feet, already covered the stoop, undisturbed by footprints. The woman looked in all directions, searching for any sign or indication of another presence. She tried to call into the blustery dark, but her nerves would not allow it. Then, directly ahead, the old woman's eyes detected the trace of an outline. Through the falling snow blowing horizontally on cutting wind, she saw what looked to be the shadow of a man standing. The air stung her ears. Already she felt her eyelashes crystallizing. Although she did not know him, for she did not know anyone, the old woman raised a hand to the faint figure and called to him. The figure took notice of her and raised a friendly hand in return, soothing her anxiety. The woman pulled the door open further, displaying the warm, welcoming fire to the frozen traveler. He trudged toward her. The fire cast a gentle light across the snow just outside her door, a light so faint it wasn't worth noting until the figure approached near enough for his face to catch the most outer rays of its glow. In his features, the old woman found a face she recognized. The face of her husband. He held his arms out to her, inviting her into his embrace. In his eyes, she saw desperate longing for her. The log fell again from her arms. Her husband's expression of desire drew her in, made her feel like floating toward him, falling into his loving embrace. But she stepped back and slammed the door shut. She engaged the heavy chain supposedly strong enough to hold against a bear. But could it hold against a ghost? The woman's husband had been dead 2 years. It was he who left her the pile of firewood, at that time stacked 2 logs deep up to the roof. Her husband had anticipated his end and spent much of his final months splitting nearby fallen trees and hauling the timber back to their home. The woman buried him under the garden. In life he provided for her, and so in death continued. But in the frozen ground was where he should be, not standing out in a snowstorm, not knocking at her door. The woman went to her 3 windows, sliding small curtains over each. Thus secluded, she wrapped herself in a blanket, nestled into her chair, and cried herself to sleep as the fire comforted and protected her. The storm lasted 2 full days and most of 3 nights. Snow fell continuously, blanketing the mountainside. The woman woke twice to the nearby crackling of falling trees. If only she could take the axe down from the mantle and go harvest their timber for her fire. However, blowing snow had drifted against the cabin, burying 2 sides completely, one being the side with the door. Until the snow blew away or melted, or until the woman found the strength to dig her way out, she was trapped. What she possessed inside the cabin comprised the entirety of her supplies. She retrieved a bowl on the morning of the 3rd day and went to a window. She drew back the curtain, allowing brilliant sunlight amplified by reflections off of every snow-coated surface into her home. The trees sparkled. She opened the window and scooped freshly blown snow from the same spot she had scooped the day before. After setting the bowl beside the fire, she shut the window once more, leaving the curtain open for light. As her water melted, the woman went to the pantry. The last bites of dried venison tempted her, but she was saving them for when her body could no longer survive off of the meager nutrients her preserved vegetables provided. She retrieved a jar, closed the pantry, and turned to the fireside. She added a log to the pulsating embers and stoked them into flame. the log caught fire. Only 5 logs remained. The snowstorm brought with it a brutal cold which persisted at her windows, frosting the insides of the glass. In some places, a trim of ice lined the ceiling as well. To keep the cabin warm enough for her to survive, the extraordinary chill had forced the woman to hasten through her small wood supply. When the snow in the bowl melted, she transferred it to a cast iron pot which she hung from a hook above the fire. She removed it again once steam rose from the water's surface and dipped her ceramic mug into it. She enjoyed the water's heat in her belly far more than the teasing flavor of her food. Sleep, the only remaining leisure activity which still brought the old woman any semblance of joy, nearly stole her before a sound outside her door snatched her back. Near the top of the door, at which the snow outside only left a few centimeters of clearance, the old woman heard a slow, rhythmic scuffing. She rose. As the sound repeated, it grew fuller. More treble clarified it to her dulling ears. She knew the sound came from something, man or beast, digging outside, but their sharp tone and patient pace convinced her the sounds belonged to a shovel. Although she bore solitude well, the woman grew giddy at the prospect of company. Isolation loses its appeal entirely when forced upon you. The shovel's blade scraped against the door, and the woman shouted to inform her rescuer, the nameless hunter, of her continued existence. She realized her chimney most certainly must have brought him to her. If not her nameless hunter, surely anyone who looked up the mountain could have seen the black smoke against the glittering snow once the storm passed. The fire continued to preserve her. With glee, she disengaged the chain and cracked open the door. Ice shattered from the hinges, and the door squealed open. The shovel nearly decapitated her. With a shout, the woman warned the rescuer nearly turned killer of her presence. The shovel paused. Snow trickled and tumbled down the fresh tunnel into the woman's home as a person knelt down on the other side. Before she could see his face, he put his arm down the tunnel, indicating by curling his gloved fingers that he would pull her to safety. The woman told him it was warm inside, and for her to leave would be suicide. The hand withdrew slightly, then returned, stretching further than before. The curling fingers nearly caught the woman's hair as she ducked away. She scolded the man and started to shut the door, wary of the stranger's intentions. Before it closed, he slid down the drift in order to show his face to her through the tunnel. With gentle kindness in his longing eyes, he smiled at her. The face, again, belonged to her husband. Heartbroken, the woman shut the door. Though she reminded herself her husband lay in the ground, it nearly broke her to close the door again in his face. She missed those kind eyes, those embracing arms. Why did she insist on living? When would she finally succumb? She engaged the chain once more and returned to her lonely chair. The fire nearly flickered out. As the woman placed one of the 5 remaining logs into the fireplace, she listened for more sounds at the door, but none came. The next 2 days brought more snow and lower temperatures. The ashes of the last log were now buried beneath the ashes of various pieces of furniture. With the axe on the mantel, the woman had broken apart her table, then her husband's chair, then her own. She now lay on a blanket on the floor with a quilt draped over her, watching the last leg of her chair blacken. The pitiful flame consuming it barely warmed the space in front of the fireplace. The old woman had abandoned the rest of the cabin to the dark and cold, including her pantry, in which her jars had now all frozen and broken. She had not been awake long, but already felt the desire to sleep again. She lazily prodded the embers with the poker near her blanket, then closed her eyes. A knock made her open them again. She thought she must have dreamt it, for the snow outside still covered the cabin door completely, but someone knocked again. Shivering, blowing clouds, she crossed her dark home and, without undoing the chain, cracked open the door. There was no one there, and no snow on the stoop either. Confused, the woman shut the door to undo the chain, then opened it again. Snow stood high on either side, but in the middle, a path cut deep into the trees. So clear was the path that she could see the dirt. And what's more, blades of grass, green with vivid life, were already sprouting in soft tufts. The woman looked up at the brilliant sky, pink from the sun setting far on the distant horizon. At the very end of the long path stood a man. The old woman was not so naive to think it might be her nameless hunter this time. She knew he could not have carved such an enormous ravine in the snow so quickly. It was another, sent to rescue her, to take her from her misery and hunger and loneliness. She recognized him immediately this time and understood why he had come. She looked over her shoulder at the fire as it sputtered its last. Her long-lost husband's face left the shadows of the trees and entered the pink light, glowing at her, his longing illuminated by the sun's waning light. This time, when he raised his arms in invitation, she ran to him. As the sun vanished, the embers in the old woman's fireplace went dark. A curl of black smoke, the last remnant of the fire, twirled up through the chimney, where it vanished, carried off in the wind. You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For ad-free episodes and bonus Into the Woods episodes, become a patron with the link in the description. You can also support the show by buying merch. That link is also in the description below. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram at The Warning Woods, and if you feel ready, meet me here next week for another journey into the Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.